Working with Asia. My name's Maddie Coca, and I'm a Career Assistant in the Career Resource Center. Thank you for joining us. Tonight's format will involve our panel members taking a few minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will open it up to questions from all of you. We will have the session go until approximately 8 p.m., and then we'll provide an opportunity for you to stay and talk with the grads individually if you'd like. Please take time to complete your evaluation at the end of the panel. Now, I'd like to turn it over to the panel for introductions.
Okay, hi, my name is Gerald, also known as Guy Legarde, and I recently completed an internship in India with a textile manufacturing company. I graduated recently in 2012 with a degree in management, and starting in August, I was shipped over to India to work with a textile manufacturing company called the Umed Textile Group. And with this company, I basically worked on business development and sales in their international department, so a lot of contact with China, Australia, European Union, and I actually still work for this company right now out of my house in the Twin Cities. So it's still going pretty strong. I also studied abroad in China when I was a senior at St. John's, and I'm also an e-scholar. As you can see by my name tag here, they had a networking event tonight, so that was pretty convenient for me. And I'll pass it on to the next host here.
Hi, I'm Bree Auringer. I was a 2010 St. Ben's grad. I majored in communication and minored in art. I was at Bunkyo Gakuen University in Tokyo for about 7 months right after I graduated. And while I was there, I was a resident assistant for 4 months with the international students, and I served as an office assistant in the international programs office, and I also worked in their chat lounge. And then after my time was up at Bunkyo, I went up north to where my partner was living at the time, to Hokkaido, and I stayed there for a couple months. And so now I'm at the University of Minnesota. I work full-time at a health policy research center, and I go to school part-time at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health.
I think I can probably use this one. So, is this on? Or can you hear me? My name is Dan Gilbertson. I'm a 2004 grad of St. John's. I feel a little bit old because when I went to school here, this building wasn't in existence. So it was kind of new driving into campus. So my background with, a lot of it's revolved around Japan. I started taking Japanese lessons, or the classes here, and then I worked with Dave at the summer camps. I studied abroad at a place called Kansai Gaidai, solely because the Bunkyo one wasn't quite set up when I was ready to go. After I graduated, I went and I was a jet teacher for 1 year outside of Kyoto. After that, I went to an intensive language school in Kyoto to continue studying Japanese. I ended up coming back and had a short part-time job at the airport helping tourists, so I was the guy with the little sign, directing little old Japanese ladies around the airport. And then I ended up taking a sales and product management job outside of Chicago for a Japanese manufacturing company, where I worked for 4 years. After that, I ended up moving back here. I did an MBA at Carlson, and I now work for Medtronic doing mergers and acquisitions for them. I do work currently now with some Japanese companies, and if all goes well, I may end up doing a year in Singapore next year where I work with all the Southeast Asian countries on market development. So mostly background in Japan, but some other experiences as well. Thielman?
I think someone will go before me.
So, my turn now? Hi, my name is Tillana Chakraborti, and well, listening to all you guys, I feel quite the dinosaur here. I've been working for the past 10 years with 3M Company. I work in their Global Channel Services Organization, which basically is an international channel management group within the company. What we do is we work with the subsidiaries of 3M and basically help them in business development and project management. So we manage the global supply chain for them. So they identify the business within those subsidiaries, and then they come to us, and then we basically fulfill the business as partly project management and partly global supply chain management, and distribution channel network, etc. So what we have regional responsibilities, and I have primarily Asia and the Caribbean region and Africa.
All right. I'm Nick Thielman, also class of '04. Oddly enough, Dan and I lived across the hall from each other freshman year, and Tommy for short. So when we started exchanging emails for this event, it was pretty cool to see him on that. I was a pre-med natural sciences person at St. John's. Really didn't have the idea to go into business, but I got a little bit burnt out with the whole medicine thing after my junior year and decided to take some time off. So I got into sales, software sales with a company called Oracle, and I was with them for just a little bit over a year, and they asked me to go overseas and basically build a business development and sales team. It was an inside sales structure that they had here in the U.S. They wanted to emulate that and have someone with that kind of experience. So I was pretty lucky to be selected for that. So from 2006 through 2010, I spent a lot of time in the Asian market, the entire Asia Pacific region, in fact. 2 of those years I lived in Melbourne, Australia. 2 of those years were based in Singapore. I was doing a lot of travel throughout the region, found it to be fast-paced, really good for high-tech, for finance, a lot of great industries there. So part of my job and my scope going out there was to develop those, or to have an understanding of what those industries would be buying from a software perspective and how we could influence what they're doing. So it was a really good experience. I welcome you guys' questions. As of right now, I have moved back to the U.S., and I'm still working for Oracle, based in our Minneapolis office.
Sorry about I'm late. So my name is Clement. I just graduated last year. Thank you. I see some of my fans. I graduated with a degree in economics last year, and before, I'm from Shanghai originally. Before came to this country, I spent a year in Hong Kong after I left Shanghai in high school. So after I graduated here, I didn't go straight to work in like most of people would. I went to do an internship in Washington, D.C. at a think tank called Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars. Specifically, I was in 2 offices. One office is called China Environment Forum. I was researching on global climate change and clean energy. My piece will be published, I think, hopefully very soon this spring in Woodrow Wilson Center called Mongolian Mining Boom, the intersection of energy and water. In another office, I was at Henry Kissinger Institute on China and United States. I was in the office of Ambassador Steve Roy. He was the first U.S. ambassador to China after the break-off of U.S.-China relations in 1989. So after that, they offered me a position to be research assistant for another think tank called Council on Foreign Relations. And that contract would end if I took it this May. After most of the students go off, after a 1-year fellowship, most students go off for PhD. In my case, if I did the political economy research with this professor from Council on Foreign Relations, maybe, most likely I'll be on East Coast, one of the graduate schools with PhDs. But I didn't feel PhD, I wasn't ready for PhD yet, and I don't want to do something I'm not ready. I don't want to do something I'm uncertain about. So instead, I took another job offer in private sector. So I'm now back in Minneapolis, working for a medium-sized company called Minnesota Rubber and Plastics. We just got acquired by Northwest Equity Partner. Northwest is a part of Wells Fargo. So officially, we are part of Wells Fargo now. So, but I'm not in finance. My industries, mostly 2 industries. One is medical, one is automotive. My role is a little bit special, I would say. I travel back and forth between here and Asia once to twice a season. I am working as a marketing analyst. Most of my work is provided for the strategic decision makers in the company to try to figure out what is the next step I would say that with a economics degree and liberal arts education is very significant in my current work. So on the one hand, I know I know how to do regression analysis. On the other hand, I know I feel comfortable to work in a uncertainty environment because a lot of work we have trying to be doing in Asia, particularly in China, is uncertain. So we are growing this business from bottom up. So that's all I do. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer, especially those of you are not business-oriented majors. If you are like political science or international relations, I would dearly, dearly encourage you go to DC if you have time. So that's it from my side. Thank you.
We'll open it up for questions now. Any of the panelists, including Tillana.
I have a question for Bree. What made you interested in going to Japan and studying Japan?
Well, it was actually this time my junior year, I think, when Bunkyo has an exchange program every year with St. Ben's. So there are Bunkyo students here right now, and Sandra is here from Bunkyo. If you have any specific questions about Bunkyo, you can ask her or Dave. So I was an RA in West Apartments, and so a lot of them were staying in the West Apartments, and I found out that they were going to come stay, so I hosted them for dinner. And I have a good friend who spent a few years in Japan studying Japanese. So that's how I kind of came into that and was interested. Because I'm calm. I was calm in art. I didn't study Japanese. When I was in Japan, I was studying for the GRE. It was probably one of my biggest regrets is not learning the language more. But that was the initial kind of key into the culture there.
My question's also for Brie. So how did you then connect to become an RA at Bunkyo later?
Yeah, well, I learned about the programs. I asked Dave a lot of questions. He was very kind to me and answered them. And I learned that the position was actually it was an RA for a portion of the time there. So that I thought maybe that would help me because I really had no prior experience with Japanese culture. So that I think really helped, and asking Dave a lot of questions helped. Sorry, Dave, I don't want to bombard you, but
Just give him a spot. Right?
yeah, you why don't you come up? And so yeah, that really helped. And yeah, I was an RA for 3 years, so that was my main job at St. Ben's. Yeah.
My question is for Gerard. I guess I was wondering what some of like the main differences you saw in India business compared to here.
Some of the main differences between business in India and the USA, from my experience, is definitely the communication. I was in contact directly with the owner of the factory at all times. I relied on him for a lot of my information. Where in the US, a lot of the times, especially in some of the smaller companies, or I'm sorry, some of the larger companies, you might not be communicating directly with some of the owners and managers of the company, but in my case, I was directly in contact with the president of the company. He was giving me quotes, prices, which were changing on a weekly basis for the fabrics that we were producing. So that was one of the main differences. Also, communication wasn't necessarily as prompt. A lot of times I felt like I was nagging him or bugging him to get answers, but it could have been Indian culture. It could have just been that he was a really busy guy. So those two things were two of the main differences for me.
This one's for Dan. What are some skills you think will benefit you in working with Japan or working with Japanese companies?
I mean, the biggest thing that, not so much as even as a teacher, but especially when you're living there, understanding that you're there and you're not going to change the country and you're not going to turn to America. even though I put an American flag in my room and said this part is America. You know, understanding that you have to change. You can't expect to change things there. And then more than anything is patience. It takes time. I mean, for me, I'd spent some time there, but when you spend time there studying abroad, and when you spend time there working for Japanese bosses, it's night and day. You know, at the one hand, one time I was having a lot of fun, the other time I was working. So I think the biggest thing is just patience, you know, an openness to change, a willingness to adapt. I mean, adaptability is something that's going to be very important. And understanding that kind of you're in a different world now, and you got to learn how to deal with that.
Would any of the rest of you want to respond to a similar, that same question? From your experience?
I would just comment that adaptability and being able to immerse yourself is very important wherever you go. You know, like I said, I had responsibility over the entire Asia-Pacific region. If you look at just Southeast Asia, the Indonesias, the Singapores, the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, they're all very different cultures, and although, you know, it's a 1-hour flight, you're going to be landing in an entirely different world. So being able to work, you know, on a personal level, like you said, one time you're there for fun, and then also there's a different kind of working style. You know, you just have to be able to immerse yourself and adapt. So first and foremost, I think that's it. You know, realize that you're there, enjoy the experience, and embrace it, because there is a reputation for Americans in a lot of places that we travel, and it's not just Americans. You know, it's in some cases Australians, British, but you know, we're seen to be very outgoing and sometimes loud, and in certain cultures that may be perceived in a negative way. So, you know, I did my best to just, you know, be myself and not be loud, which I'm not super loud anyway, but.
Okay, thank you all for coming. So I guess my question is for all of you. So most of you live like an international lifestyle. You travel abroad constantly. So what do you think are some of the difficulties of living a life like that, and how do you overcome that?
I guess I can start down on this end. Some of the difficulties just getting adapted to the culture that you're living in, whether it's the food, the language, the way of life. I definitely lived a lower quality of life than I would have in the U.S., but I didn't have any problems with that. The food I was eating was differently, so just getting used to everyday life and getting into routine is definitely some of the more difficult parts, and as well as communication, getting used to different cultural issues. I was doing a lot of things that I wouldn't have been doing in the U.S., and a lot of things that I was doing in the U.S. I was unable to do in India. So those are some of the more difficult things for me while being abroad.
I had traveled before. I had studied abroad in South Africa, and I traveled, but I never stayed abroad longer than 4 months before. And I think once I hit that 4-month point, there was a part of me up until then, I'd been definitely a tourist. Like, I'd felt like a tourist. I was trying to see all the sights in Tokyo. I was trying to travel as much as I could, and then I just got really burnt out. And so I had to realize that I had to live like I was actually living in Japan for a while. Like, just enjoy doing daily activities that are normal to, you know, going to the grocery store and, you know, taking your time making dinner and doing things that are normal in life in general, instead of feeling the need to always be traveling, or else I got really burnt out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great advice. I mean, even when I moved to Chicago, and when I've traveled to other places, it's trying to find a place, especially if you're going to be there long term, and saying that, kind of accepting it as like, oh, this is my home now, and not, well, I'm only here temporarily. Because when you start doing that, then all of a sudden you start maybe not branching out as much as you should, maybe not making the relationships that you could be making if you were saying, you know, this is where I live, instead of, you know, well, where are you from? Like, I'm from Minnesota. It's like, where are you from? Like, I live here. I think it's kind of a mental switch that it's important to flip. Otherwise, like a traveling lifestyle, you know, in a previous job I traveled quite a bit, and it was kind of like up in the air where you have all your little, you probably had this too, where you have all your little travel cards and hotel cards, you have a lot of points. That's fun for a little while, but it gets pretty old when, you know, you wake up and you're in a hotel room and you don't remember what city you're in either. And so it's just understand that there's a lot of really cool things about traveling, and there's also some things that you might not think about. I would highly recommend trying it and doing it, but understand that it's not all, you know, a lot of times we travel, it's not to the most exotic places. So I did a trip to Puerto Rico and Costa Rica in the same week, and I never saw a beach once. Like, you know, I was in a factory the entire time. So just remember that, you know, think about what you're going to be doing.
I did, except that my perspective is a little more unique because I'm actually from India. So when I go back and work there, it's not traveling for me, it's actually going back home. So really, my experience is a little bit different, although having said that, having been away from home, from India for so long, when I go back, there's definitely an amount of adjustment that I have to make. But I think the speaker before me really captured it very well. It's a matter of adaptability, flexibility, and thinking of it as your home and not somewhere you've gone temporarily and trying to change everything. And that's not just with daily life. That's also with doing business. And I speak specifically in India because the practices are definitely, the business culture is definitely very, very different still from working over here. Having said that, I have worked very closely with Africa and also with the Caribbean region as well, the Latin America, and currently actually Latin America is one of my primary responsibilities. So every part of the world definitely comes with that unique business culture, with unique work culture, and some things the quicker you adapt to, the better business relation. It's really ultimately business is all about that relationship and building that trust. So kind of be open to that. And of course, as long as your business conduct and policy of your company is maintained, kind of be open and adaptable to that different and unique environment. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback just on this a little bit, but I think it really depends on the duration or your expectation of what you're planning to do. Is it a 1 to 2 week trip? Are you planning to go there and, like myself, be there for a couple years? Or do you want to, perhaps move somewhere and make that your new home? And you're going to come to different challenges based on either of those scenarios. I can tell you that one of the challenges that I faced was actually coming back home and repatriating. You expect that there's going to have some level of consistency, but your friends are going along their path and family on another path. So I would say just be mindful of the relationships that you're keeping, both where you're at as you're immersed in that culture and then also back home, and just have an understanding that it changes things a little bit. It gives you a different perspective, and that's could be both a good and a bad thing, but mostly good, I think, as long as you have know what your expectations are and working towards that.
I will echo with some of the panelists. The change and the lack of consistency is one of the most difficult part. You go off travel and living overseas a month or 2 months in a totally different lifestyle. For example, personally, one of the major challenges for me is to lose weight. So you gotta for the past 6 months, I was in China twice, and I'm off to China again next weekend. So that's you count jet lag 6 times of adjustment of jet lag. So I would say that take your time in college to work out. Don't be like me. Second part is I would say, since I was in the same situation with our Indian friend, China is my home. So in a sense, it's easy, but in another sense, it's difficult, because as a foreigner living in the U.S., I don't actually 100% to fit in. If you are from Minnesota, if you go to East Coast, you will not fit in 100%. The same, vice versa. And even if from the same country, you won't fit into one culture if you move. That's one thing. Second thing is I got a reverse culture shock. Give you one example. The first time I was back in China in November last year, my friends and family started to tell me this, say, Clement, look, this is China. This is how China looks like now. when people start to tell you, speak to you like that manner, you will feel a little bit weird because I know where I was born in China, so I feel like I'm foreigner in a certain, but that's a point of realization I had. Is different now. It's not the environment is different. Of course, China is changing every day very rapidly. It's me different being here for 5 years almost, being overseas for 6 years, including Hong Kong. And the last thing I would like to point out is I mentioned the difference, but the first thing heading to a new cultural environment will be very important is to realize what's the difference. Second thing is after you realize the difference, look for the social groups fit into your category, and with those whom can kind of tell you more about how to fit in to the environment. And I would not try to change the environment because I don't have that power. So better to adapt ourselves to the new environment. I guess that's the best way to go with it. Thank you.
I was wondering what activity you participated in college affected your truly global career the most? Discussion to everyone.
What activity in college I think helped our career the most or affected our career the most?
Your global career.
I guess I'll start with that if no one's ready. Definitely e-scholars was what kicked it off for me. I started off my college career thinking I wasn't going to study abroad, and if I did, it'd be England or Australia or somewhere where I'd be able to fit in. But I got into the e-scholar program with Paul right here in the front row, and took me over to China and fell in love with the place. And I had about 2 weeks from returning from my trip to China with the e-scholar group to decide to study abroad in China. And after studying abroad in China, I wanted to do more, so I got connected with my guy King here in the back, and he got me connected up in India. So it's just been kind of a big chain reaction, and it all started with the e-scholar program, and it's been a good adventure so far.
I studied abroad in South Africa, which really I think is a great opportunity. St. Ben, St. John's do such a great job with studying abroad. And then when I came back, Extending the Link was kind of just starting up. Andrea Caro started it years back now. And then we ended up deciding to go to Uganda, and that was it was a documentary that we produced in Uganda about child-headed households. So Terry Barrero also, and we worked alongside. Management. Same with e-scholars, similar like that. So that was a great opportunity. I mean, any chance to go abroad is great, or participate in cultural groups on campus.
I mean, I would absolutely agree. Studying abroad was one of the coolest things I did. I would also think about, so I was an English teacher abroad. I would also think about doing that if you are interested, because that's one of the easiest ways to get abroad, because they have certain programs. So I did Japan, which was great. I had a number of friends go to China. I know some people did it in Korea, and I think you can do it all over. And it doesn't have to just be Asia. You can do it in lots of countries. So like the study abroad kind of led me. I had such a good time studying abroad. I said, you know what, I want to go back and do this some more. So I would say if you haven't, obviously study abroad, and I think that will kind of give you a feeling on whether that's the life you want. But I don't think you talk to many people who are like, oh, I studied abroad, it was terrible. I don't know.
I don't think I caught the whole thing. Something about study abroad, sorry.
Oh, it was what event, I guess, in college really kickstarted your love for Asia and your interest in going abroad?
Well, my love for Asia came with my birth. Well, again, my experience is definitely a little bit different from the rest of the panelists, except for the gentleman from China, maybe. I really did not technically do any study abroad. I just came here and did my master's and started working before I completed my degree. But what I will emphasize, of course, if you can do the study abroad, I would, from what I hear from everybody else, I highly would encourage it. But even if even if you can't make that happen, even if you cannot do a study abroad, a full-on study abroad, I would definitely encourage the students to at least try to travel, because growing up, that's what I've always done, from India, pretty much all over the world, with my father, basically, because he had a traveling job. So that kind of, I think, sparked my interest in global cultures and how does it work. So, and I kind of kept that interest, and even since coming here, since started working, both through work and otherwise, I've been lucky enough to travel to a few parts of the world, different continents, whether again it's Africa or Asia or Latin America. And that experience has really only enriched me. I mean, in spite of the fact I work day in and day out with these folks, it's always different to be actually there to kind of, see them, that culture. So there's really nothing as enriching, and also it definitely does open your mind up. So I definitely I'd highly encourage that.
Well, and just to add one more thing, when you think about looking at advantages for your career, studying abroad or living abroad or doing something abroad brings a whole lot of intangibles with it that someone who's looking at a resume says, wow, they went and lived in this other area. Well, we have interests there. Or it has this whole other aspect of your ability to, work with other cultures, work with other types of people, work with different things, live somewhere else that it might not matter whether it's Asia or wherever, but just to say, like, they are able to get out of their comfort zone and be successful. There's a whole lot of things that kind of get wrapped up in the fact of saying, I lived abroad or I studied abroad for a while. All get kind of wrapped into that.
Right, and actually, again, just one quick thing with that. I was talking to one of my friends who actually works in Medtronic, and she's an international role within Medtronic, and she was recently recruiting for an international role. And when she was looking at these resumes, the ones that jumped out to her were the ones where the candidate has at some point, you're putting in your resume, you're applying for a job that is if you are applying for a job in an international field. However, nowhere in your resume or in your career you've actually done anything about it. You haven't gone anywhere, you haven't worked with anybody in international sphere or in the global atmosphere. So that kind of is, if you are looking into a career in international, it definitely helps to have that on your resume. But I'll just throw that out.
Yeah, I can speak to that firsthand too. The team that I built in Asia ended up being about 230 people, and we looked for a lot of those intangibles. So regardless of where the person lived, we had to understand that there were certain attributes that basically allow them to balance a workload and really take on the full thing. So, I guess just making note of the fact that we go to a liberal arts school. So when I was here, did some work study, played a sport, had a lot of science labs, really learned to balance my daily workload. And I think it prepared me because I did have diverse classes, and obviously a busy schedule, and I think I made the most of it. And when I was put into an environment where I had to balance a lot of different things, including cultures, that helped a lot. So pretty easy answer, but just holistically going to St. John's and St. Ben's.
I would totally agree. See the value of liberal arts, be able to take advantage of diverse aspects of disciplines you can learn. I was actually starting to think about transferring when I was sophomore year to go to UT Austin Business School and North Carolina Chapel Hill Business School. I got in, but I didn't go. But I think that was the best decision I've ever made as state. Especially after I started working. But back to your question, so what was the most valuable experience I had while I was in college? Couple of things, three things. First thing, since I was a foreigner, I am a foreigner, to learn about American culture. First thing I did was being RA, so most of the students on my floor was American students. Second thing was, because I was RA, all of my guys elected me as a senator on campus. So actually, I compiled up a team of students, including you. They all support me very well, and they campaigned for me. And finally, I got on Senate. I served on Senate for 1.5 years until I quit. But the one thing I do want to point out is the experience being on Senate and the process of running on campaign was something truly amazing for me from a country, from a communist country, although it's the most capitalist country in the world now, even more capitalist than this country. That kind of first impression of democracy was amazing for me to learn about. You actually need to smile at people you don't like to get vote. And then after you get on power, you abuse your power. Sometimes, not most of the time. But after Senate, the reason I quit Senate was because of another organization I built with Gold sitting in the back. It's called Minnesota China Business Opportunity Conference. It's coming up next weekend, so come. I was one of the co-founding member, and the vision of it is I was thinking that one of the reasons I came to this country was I read a book. And the author of the book, we later became very good friends, and he built something similar in Michigan State called Supply Chain Forum of China. And then I was thinking, in such a boring place, why not do something exciting? I mean, but the difference is, I also realized the difference is state colleges, they are huge. They have 40,000 students. They have huge audience group. They have a lot of alum, but not us. So first year we did that, and the second year we start to collaborate with other private liberal arts colleges in Minnesota.
I'm in the middle of a...
So it's next weekend gonna be the third week. That's the second thing very valuable to me. The third thing is Washington, D.C. Any of you are political science or international relations? Okay, no, okay, cool. Anyway, if you are if you are interested in overseas or international experience, I would say take the chance to go to DC, participate in McCarthy Center events. And I wasn't interested. I thought politics were a little bit too vague or dirty. But later on, I found a fascination in it. So the reason why I went there was because of Minnesota China and Business Opportunity Conference. I organized the event. I get to know I get to know better about politics through a former congressman from Minnesota. And after that, get to know McCarthy Center, and they gave me a scholarship to go to do an internship in Washington, D.C. Between my senior and junior year. So I did the internship. That exposure to public policy, to industrial organization in DC really introduced me what the third major industry like in the US: government, business, and nonprofit, civil society. That is very significant in terms of me making a decision after I graduate. I was thinking about going to graduate school, thinking about going full-time job, but thinking about maybe I can get a fellowship. So I did. I finally chose a fellowship in DC. So these three experiences: first, Senate; second, U.S.-China conference; third, Washington D.C. internship experience, most valuable in my college. Thank you.
I think it's definitely important to be starting to consider these countries as potential customers, potential markets, as these are countries of 1.3 and 1.1 billion people each, and the purchasing power is growing and growing and growing, and by 2020, India's purchasing power is going to be higher than the U.S., so it's definitely something you need to consider going forward. What products are going to be marketable to these countries? Probably all products. So if you're able to get an in with a company that's going to be selling to either of these two countries, I would definitely move forward with that. From my perspective, the textile industry, I never thought China would be an importer of textiles, but China imports a huge amount of textiles. In fact, there's a law in the U.S., an anti-dumping duty, that does not allow China to import artist canvas into the U.S. without a huge tax. But what they can do is import woven and primed canvas from India into China, stretch it into artist canvas, and send it to the U.S. Without the anti-dumping duty. So there's huge opportunities in all these different industries that you need to be aware of and to continue to look for opportunities, especially with trade laws changing on a regular basis. In 2005, there's no more quota on China, so China pretty much is going to continue to be one of the leading exporting countries in the world. So besides that, they're also big importers, and as mentioned, China and India are both going to be huge markets for the future, so keep an eye on them for that as well.
I mean, I'm in medical devices. China and India are big targets for Medtronic, as well as our competitors who are also here in town. You know, we just made a lot of acquisitions there, so we're looking at that, as he had said, as not a place to manufacture what we have, but a place to sell what we have. Whatever you're thinking about, you have to think about, you know, there's lots of different countries, there's lots of different cultures, they all have their own challenges. I would think more about, instead of what do you think the area that's going to be growing the biggest, is think about more about what you want to do and what you're interested in either selling or working with, because as he had said, pretty much everything is going to be needed by these countries that are growing. And even outside of China and India, there's all the places where Thielman was working in Southeast Asia and other countries, including giant emerging markets in Latin America. So I would think a lot about what you're interested in being involved with, because whatever you're interested in, there's going to be a market to sell it somewhere. You know, they're up-and-coming developing countries. What we face a lot is trying to sell very expensive medical devices to areas that may not have the hospitals that are able to do it. But when you look at even a country like China, they might still have 2,000 hospitals that have it, even if it's only a tiny percentage. So I would think first and foremost about that.
Were you able to hear the question?
No, I'm sorry. I'm just having a harder time following the question.
Let me know if I get it. It's with the ever-changing climate of Asia. What opportunities do you see that are rising for students coming out of college?
You mean, I'm sorry, when you say opportunities, you mean career opportunities in China and India?
Yeah, career opportunities.
Okay. I can specifically speak more for India because that's where I have greater experience. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. The economy is growing. It's growing tremendously, and there's so much energy. There's so much stuff happening that I would say it's really huge. I have had colleagues and friends both who have actually gone back because of career opportunities. And you know, movement is very quick. People are very quick in with switching around their companies, their careers. I mean, as in their jobs. So I mean, movement is fantastic. The middle class is absolutely growing. You know, their buying power, or you know, it's just growing tremendously. The government has stepped in, and you know, they have opened up a lot of things, which makes it easier for the middle class to purchase a lot more things. So the industry, the market itself is, you know, there's a lot of stuff happening. So if you are looking for something, a career in India, again, that's where I have more experience. I would say there's definitely plenty of opportunities. It's, you know, all these companies everywhere. It's, you know, the population is very young on an average. The leadership teams are very young. So there's definitely movement, the path to grow very fast, to grow your career very fast over there. So.
If I can jump back in real quickly because something just came to me. One thing I would think about is when you're thinking about what skill set you want, and this is from my personal experience and a lot of friends I had and also some of the hiring managers I know, is if you're taking foreign language classes, which I think you guys all probably still have to, I would say don't think first and foremost about translation as a job. So I took intensive Japanese language classes. I speak Japanese pretty well, although now it's kind of slipped a little bit. But I didn't look for translation jobs because I didn't see translating Japanese to English as a career path. I saw it as a skill that I could add to the other things I was doing, which ended up being sales. Because like now I know probably the hot one to study is probably getting to be Chinese. You also have to remember that in a country with 1 billion people, there's how many hundreds of millions that speak English better than you'll probably speak Chinese. So I'm not saying don't study it, but I'm saying is have that as a skill in your bag rather than this is what I do. And I probably offended someone in here by saying that. If anyone wants to be a translator, I apologize. But that's something that one of the Medtronic hiring managers said to me is, this is not a job that's going to be around much longer either because Google Translate. I mean, it's getting better and better. You'd be surprised, but I've had to translate documents before. You'd be surprised how good that's getting. Where at some point it's going to be, it's going to be better. So I would say just keep that in the back of your head where those are awesome skills to have, and language is great. And I would definitely recommend learning one, but that might not be a career.
Just learn to use Google Translate.
Yeah.
I think, I mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of different industries, and each country is going to, the contribution to the gross domestic product is going to be different by the respective industries, by the industries within those countries. So if you just take, once again, Southeast Asia, Indonesia is really big on natural resources, and that was an area that, we worked in quite a bit. Obviously, there's textiles in China and manufacturing, and I could kind of go on and on with the list, but, there's big finance hub, there's big tech hubs, manufacturing, textiles. Like you said, green energy that's big, and that's going to be going across the world. So I guess get in where you fit in. Take what you know, be armed with some of the things like Dan said. It's all in your toolkit, and just figure out where you want to go and take the steps to get there. And if you're assertive and you feel like you've done all the work leading up to that, you'll get there.
I think firstly, before I answer that question, it's important to ask ourselves, how you define opportunities. Because some opportunity A might be the opportunity for me, not the opportunity for you, depending on who you are and what you want to do. That's why I really agree with one of the panelists earlier just mentioned, don't look into Nick. I think Nick mentioned, look for something you are really passionate about first. Ask yourself what you are interested in first before you seek out what is the market opportunities for career. Secondly, I want to answer this question in 2 layers. First layer, geographically. Look at where are the opportunities. You may know BRICS, Brazil, China, India, Russia, and South Africa. So go to one of these countries will be good. But you may also know later last year, JP Morgan released the next 11, which include Nigeria in West Africa, and include a country you will never think the economy will be booming so fast. 17.8% GDP growth rate, where? Mongolia. So if you look at geographically, these 16 countries, you can Google them on Wikipedia, might be somewhere you want to go to if you are looking for market opportunities. Along with that, I think Nick and our friend from India mentioned that a lot of things happening in China, but we are not treating China as a outsourcing site only now. The thing about economic growth is when the country's domestic economy is booming, the middle class number is coming up. When the middle class, when the number of middle class comes up, a lot of resources they want, a lot of products they want to buy TV, they want to have internet access, they want medical services. That's one of the reasons why Medtronic acquired Kanghui $800 million. And so these kind of things can be very, very good opportunities for you to pursue. So second layer is industry-wise. Of course, green energy is one thing, but be cautious about it, because some countries, such as China, can push too hard, such as the solar industry. It went down, almost collapsed last year. It was a great industry, but has to be studied case by case. So green energy in general still is the future. Secondly, medical, I would say. People want to get healthy, people want to live longer. And thirdly, I would say still cyber. There's cyber war going on between here and China and here. And everybody is trying to build a more secure cyber facility for national defense and national security domestically and internationally. So if you are engineer major, anywhere you can pretty much get a job. Maybe our friend from Auringer can get you a job someday. So yeah, geographical-wise, look for opportunities in these 16 countries. Of course, other countries may have other opportunities too, but you have a limited time. Look for these opportunities in these 16 countries. Industrial-wise, green energy, medical, and information technology. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for Clement. So since you work in the think tank, so when you compare your experience in think tank and your sort of experience in private sector, what you will see is sort of the biggest difference between those two different types of sectors? Thanks.
Sure. Firstly, I want to give brief background about this very small but interesting industry, think tank. What is think tank? Think tank is actually a PhD program. I would define like that. But the difference is it's an off-campus PhD program, and meanwhile, it's more open to the public. Everybody has access to anything in the think tank. So what type of people in think tank? Mostly two types of people. NGO people who got bought off NGO come to think tank. Of course, think tank is also a part of NGO, but it's a special type. Most of the time, think tank will have around 200 people to up to 1,000 people. Carnegie Endowment for International Peace is one of the biggest. They were around 1,000 people. So, so within these 1,000 or 200 people, staff and scholars. On the scholar side, some professors and some, if you are international organization, some foreign retired services officials who had a very high-ranking status in their public life. Not so many private sector people. That's something, I don't know why. But a lot of, for example, the think tank I was with, a lot of private sector companies donate huge amount of money to think tanks. Woodrow Wilson Center, two major financial institutes, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, they are all major donors to us. And so that's background about think tank. So what's the difference between think tank experience and private sector? I haven't worked so long, but from my limited understanding, one thing, think tank, as I said, it's pretty much similar to a PhD program. But the difference is that you meet a lot more people, you dress nice, go to fancy events, you sometimes get drunk, but you have a great time to meet people. I mean, I guess I cannot, when I was questions what I learned from that experience, short amount of time, I can't remember anything. But one thing for sure I experienced, I valued the most is I feel like I was meeting New York Times and Time magazine front page people every day. So that's kind of exposure you would not get in private sector in our early career as a student, as a young graduate. But I did so, hearing about Watergate on the first hand, things like that. Second thing I would say is to feel, to truly feel the value of liberal arts. Because when you go to a reception, you cannot predict what kind of people you will be talking to. So anyone you meet from any industry, you need to understand a little bit, a little bit about one industry, and so that you can chat with them, interact with them, and entertain people. So, so have a wide range of knowledge is crucial. So back to private sector. So private sector is more, I would say, more intense in a different way. You do your job this week, you can see result. Next week, you can receive PO in a month. You can create $100 million by the end of this year in your group, but you can't see it in think tank. What products do you produce? You write paper, you publish your paper, and you don't create any money. You spend money. You spend tons of money doing something intangible, which something you don't know whether they will be valuable to society or not. But private sector, you do the work, you see the result, you feel accomplished.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Has there been a time or situation that is difficult to you guys, whether it's socially, culturally, and would you guys, or what type of advice would you give someone who hasn't been abroad, whether they're doing a culture shock or just food, socially talking, getting around interaction? So,
Yeah, there's hundreds of examples, and I'll keep it short to one, but I've never been the minority before going to China, and it was especially apparent in India. I was the only white guy running around. So I had some difficulties with that. It wasn't anything where my life was in danger, but I was uncomfortable at some point in time, and I never really got used to people following me around or coming up to me and whistling at me and stuff like that. So. And I have yet to experience that in the U.S., so it was definitely one of the bigger changes for me. But, you know, it's something you got to experience. It's something kind of cool that you're not going to experience in the U.S. You're not going to get that attention, or at least I'm not going to get that kind of attention here in the U.S. So it was kind of fun for me to play around with that a bit. So.
The one memory that comes to mind immediately is right before I was leaving, the earthquake hit, and it was my last week at Bunkyo, and the reaction that my coworkers had was completely different to the reaction I wanted to have. I wanted to be like, oh my gosh, an earthquake just happened. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm gonna go home, I'm gonna curl up in a ball, and I'm just gonna pass out for a week straight while I try to figure out what just happened. Whereas, like, Japan, it was very much like, okay, it happened, it's over, let's get back to work. We're okay, like, we're going to do this, it's okay, you know, we're fine. And I was not fine. And so knowing that the cultures are just so different, and preparing myself before I left, reading some books, talking to some people who have been there, and how work environments are so different, really, really helped me a lot. So, because I'm sure you can attest to this, that the culture is very different between the US and Japan. So I say read lots of books. Initially talk to some people, learn how to do your introductions. I mean, introductions in Japan are very important. In the first week I was there, I was brought around to every single office and met the president of the university and had to introduce myself formally, which was very intimidating, and luckily I had figured out how to do that before I came. So I would definitely read up on things before you head out. Wherever you're going, just read a couple books.
I literally have no end to the amount of difficulties I had. I think the one that maybe sticks out in my head, other than things like getting asked for autographs and pictures taken and followed around, I got pulled over by a cop on my bike with lights flashing because he wanted to talk and say hi. You know, they're just no end, and at some point, yeah, you just kind of get used to it. I guess the biggest advice I would have, and take this with a grain of salt, but I got a Japanese girlfriend, and she kind of figured out everything. So I wouldn't say go get a girlfriend, but I would say make a friend who lives there and understands it, you know, and try to put yourself in the mindset of if you're in the dorm or whatever and you have someone who moves in and they just don't get how things work, right? You're now that person, and you're the one who even the simplest things, you know, might be very difficult, you know, like dealing with banking things, you know, all sorts of stuff. Everything is a little bit different wherever you go. So have a friend or have a mentor or a boss or someone at your job or at your school or whatever that can kind of be like your go-to person, right? So when the cop stopped me, he's like, "You speak Japanese?" I said, "Absolutely not." And I called my vice principal and said, "Here, talk to her." You know, when I had issues with money or this and that, or I got locked out of my apartment at 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, I had someone to call and help out, because at some point you're kind of like, you know, here you have your safety net, you have your friends, you just know how everything works. And there, you know, wherever you are, there's going to be some times where you have absolutely no idea what's going on, and everyone's looking at you, and it's not always a good feeling. So I would kind of remember wherever you go, think about someone you know here that just doesn't quite seem to get it, and recognize that now you're that person, and just kind of try to go with it. Ask people, but get a good friend who really knows what's happening, I think, and really speaks the language really well. It's probably the best.
Did you hear the question?
So it's more about the culture shock when you first get there? Is that?
Yeah, I feel like this is like a game show, but like a difficult situation that you might have had, either going to a different country or coming here, and how you were able to deal with it, and maybe some advice you can give to people who have never been over in Asia.
Right. So again, my experience is definitely going to be very different, because for me it's just going back. Although I will say something. Recently I was having a discussion with some of my colleagues who had never been outside the United States, and they had to go to India for business. And I think, previous panelists had said something about, definitely read up as much as you can. But one thing I will say, that once you arrive, at least in India, no matter how much you read, just be prepared. It's definitely going to be a very, very different situation when you land there, mainly because of just the sheer number of people. And, you know, culture-wise, there's definitely, there isn't that feeling of, okay, the personal space. There isn't any concept of personal space. So that piece really just surprised me these days, even when I go back. And, you know, so my last trip, which was as recent as January, when I went back, I think from a day-to-day living person, I didn't go there for business, it was a personal trip. But from a day-to-day, you know, interaction perspective, I think what struck me is that, you know, it's just, things are changing dramatically in India and China, I suppose, and, you know, at least again in India. But it's still very different from how it works over here. So just, you know, just be open to it, and yes, again, I would have to agree with the previous panelists that if you have a mentor or a buddy or somebody that you could work with, if you're going there for work, of course you'll have your colleagues over there. Just be with that person, because it definitely is very, very helpful to have that local person who who knows how things would work there, because it definitely is very different. So just overall, you know, be open, and once you're there, if you're open and if you're flexible, it definitely will, it'll work out ultimately. India, you know, it's a very unique experience, and both from business and the day-to-day living perspective, it's just, and it's just going to be it falls into place ultimately.
Yeah, when you initially asked the question, nothing came to mind, but hearing some of these stories, I was like, oh yeah, that's happened. I actually got pulled over in Thailand, and I happened to be with a couple coworkers, and after about 5 minutes of what seemed to be pretty intense arguing between the cop and my coworkers, they ended up giving them bribe money, and I was like, I had my life flash before my eyes. I envisioned myself in a Thai jail for the rest of my life. And it ended up being like $3 US, and I was sweating for no reason. So I'll just reiterate that wherever you go, don't just read, don't just get girlfriends that happen to be from that country. But have a network. I had the good fortune, most of the places I traveled, I had coworkers that lived there, and they could tell me, when you're in Manila, you can't jump on those really cool looking buses as a Caucasian because someone may try to kidnap you. Just take taxis and be safe. So whatever countries I went to, I avoided a lot of issues just by talking to people that live there. So first and foremost, that's what I would do. And for those of you that are going to go live in another country, look for networking groups, whether it's, I was a member of the American Chamber of Commerce, and it wasn't just Americans that were members. There was a lot of diversity in that group. I met a ton of people and still friends, wherever we travel. And I had a friend that actually went to Tokyo just this past week. I have friends in Tokyo, and I said, hey, you should, hook up with my friend Evan. They did, showed him the city, and it's just a really good thing to do. So, pay it forward, keep networking, and be safe.
And I can make a plug quick. So I'm on the board of directors for the Japan-America Society of Minnesota, and we have a lot of connections with people over there. And so again, like networking is a better way to put it than the way I put it, but have that network of people. And so there are things that you might have thought about. I know that a few people in here probably know what our organization is, but there's probably something similar for whatever country you're looking at doing. There's going to be some interest group or some business group or something that would be probably more than willing to help you out and provide you with some contacts. That people love when you have interest in what they're interested in. So.
Cannot agree more, friends. My friend on panel, Guy, taught me how to jump a car. So that's something I would not know if I were in China, how to jump a car. So, but the question ends to be, so in a foreign country, how to make friends? One of the approaches is, be associated with with some organizations you are interested in, any organizations, but don't be attached to too many, because I don't think you can handle, and I believe in depth than breadth. So secondly, I would say that always have a curiosity. I guess if you choose to go abroad, to go somewhere out of your comfort zone, it's already showing some level of curiosity of yourself. Otherwise, you will not choose to go to a foreign place to you. But after you arrive there, keep that curiosity level high. It's not very easy, and a lot of times can be very frustrating. And I remember the first time I came to this country, I do not know why I left a 30 million population city in Shanghai, come to this, how many people, I don't know. Very different experience, but later on, you find a way to be involved. Like later on knows that, because going to bar is not something good students will do in China. But if you continue to do that, not going to bar in here, you will not make friends. Any friend. I realized right away after I entered Senate, the first night I went to South, everybody have that memory. I saw the president of Senate was drinking so drunk there. The thing I realized is it's not all about study. Of course, you study very hard. I studied very hard. Almost the first year I was here, every night, including weekends, I was always one of the last one left the library. Try keep my GPA up, but I regret I didn't go out with friends and hang out, spend time with my friends that much, that enough. So it's the same. It's the same with my current situation. Of course, I know China. Be with your friends and try to adapt. Again, try to adapt to the environment, and be responsible, do anything, including drinking, including working. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, before we wrap things up, let's give a hand to all of our panel judges.